Hello everyone, this is Glenda Winkleman and welcome back to Creative Grandma. This is going to be what I call Back to the Basics, and this video is for all my new subscribers out there. Some of our newbies have a little bit of trouble with the chain, and especially when it says working in the back bumps of a chain. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to make a chain, and I'm going to show you the two different ways that I work in a chain. One when you just go under the chain and work right through the chain, and one when you go into the back bump. So I'm going to use the Red Heart Super Saver, and this is light raspberry. Just shows up a little bit nicer on camera. So let me zoom up just a little bit. Now I just tie my yarn around my hook. My gram taught me that 50-60 years ago, about 50 years ago, and I've always tied the knot then. There's other ways you can do it, but that's just what I do. Now to make a chain, I have my knot tied around my hook, and you can see that there's a loop. So if you take your hook out, you can see that loop. So you insert your hook in that loop. You take your yarn. Now if you're new to crocheting, I hold my yarn a little funny because when my gram taught me how to crochet, she had half her finger missing from a sewing machine accident. So she always held her yarn at the top of her finger that was cut off and then had her finger there. So that's why I hold my yarn kind of strangely. Some people wrap the yarn around their finger. You'll have your own technique and own style of crocheting. So don't feel that when you hold your yarn that you have to be like somebody else. You'll have to determine what's most comfortable for you. There's no right and no wrong way. As long as you keep a nice tension, it's kind of like a sewing machine, just enough pressure to where your yarn isn't like hanging down real loose, because if you try to crochet like that, it's just hard because your yarn's too loose. That's why you keep just a nice little tension on it, not too tight, but just a nice tension. Now with that said, we're just going to begin with our chain. You're going to yarn over the hook, and your yarn will go into the hook, that groove in your hook, and you're just going to pull it through your loop. This will be your chain. That's your first chain. This does not count as a chain. So we'll just do that a few times. Yarn over the hook, catch your yarn into that groove in your hook, and then just pull it through the loop. And just try to keep your loops even and the same size. You don't want to pull up because your loops will be big like that, and then if you get tight you'll have a small chain. You don't want to do that. So let me go back to my chain. And again, this is just the basics for newbies who's trying to learn how to crochet, who's may have never held a crochet hook before. Again, yarn over the hook, get your yarn in that groove of the hook, and then pull it through your loop. Yarn over the hook, make sure that yarn's in that groove of that hook which holds your yarn, and then pull it through the loop. And just continue in that manner till you get several chains. So I'm just going to go ahead and chain a few more. And you can see we're increasing our chain. Now the other thing I wanted to address is when you're working on a pattern and it says a multiple of 2 plus 1, what that's telling you to do is you're going to make a chain that's divisible by 2, and then you're going to add whatever number's there. So I said a multiple of 2 plus 1, so you would go 1 2 1 2 1 2. You would continue doing that until you got it the length that you want. So when your chain's as long as you want, which would usually be your width if you're working across, use the multiple of that stitch pattern. We just did 2 2 2 and 2, and now we have to add one more chain after we get it the width we want. So then we just add 1. That's what a multiple is. Now if the multiple was 5 plus 3, then you would chain 5 again, chain 5 again, and then when it's the width that you want, then you would add 3 at the very end. So now this is the part where when you're working in a foundation chain. Now this all depends on what stitch you're working in, is which chain you would go in first, and that's determined by your pattern. So if you're working in a single crochet, you usually always go in the second chain from the hook. So you would skip this beginning chain and you would go underneath. Now I go underneath just that top strand of the chain. Let me turn this sideways. I just go under that one strand of yarn and then I work my stitch. Yarn over the hook, I pull it through that chain, yarn over the hook, and I pull it through the 2 loops. That made my single crochet. So then you look for your next chain. Here's your next chain. I just go under that top loop only. Some people may have a different way of doing it. This is just my basic way of how I do it. And then I work my single crochet. You find your next chain, and this chain you can tell is worked in because your stitch is in it. So you would go to the next chain, which is here. Insert your hook and work your single crochet. So now if the pattern tells you, let me rip this out. So now we're back at our chain and we have it, and we're going to begin our pattern. Now if your pattern says work in the back bump of the next chain, what you're going to do, and again it all depends on what stitch you're working. A single crochet, you usually go in the second chain. If it's a double crochet, you're usually going into this 4th chain from hook. So it all depends on the stitch. So just read your instructions. So now we're going to work in the back bump, and we're working a single crochet. So we're going to skip this first chain here. Here's the chain we need to go in. So the back bump, what you're going to do is you're just going to turn your chain and look at the back, and you'll see this horizontal strand of yarn. Let me pull my hook out. Here's a horizontal strand, here's a strand, here's a strand, and you can see when you look on the back of that chain, see those pieces of yarn that go straight across right in the middle? That's what they call the back bumps. So let me show you how we do that. We're going to skip the first chain. We're going to go to the second chain from hook. You're going to turn that chain just so you can see that back bump, that horizontal strand, and you're going to insert. My hook is really round on the end. I like the pointed hooks because you can get them in a little better. So you're just going to put your hook underneath that horizontal bar, and then you're going to work your stitch. And I just worked my single crochet. So then you'll look at your work and you'll see you just worked in this chain here. So we're going to go into the next chain. You're going to turn your hook and look for that next back bump, which is this strand of yarn that's going sideways. Take your hook, insert it under that bar. Now sometimes this is a little more time consuming to do. We just insert it into that back bar, and now I'm going to work my single crochet. And I'm going to do a few stitches, and then I'm going to show you the reason why they like to go into the back loops. Okay, we just worked in that chain, so now we're going to go into the next chain. So just turn that chain slightly, look for that next vertical bar, insert your hook under that vertical bar, and work your single crochet. We're going to look for our next chain, which is here. You're going to turn it slightly, look for that back bump, insert your hook, yarn over the hook, catch that yarn in the crook of that hook. It catches the yarn, you pull it through that back bump. You have 2 loops on hook, yarn over the hook, and then you're going to pull it through those 2 loops, and that creates your single crochet. So let me do it 2 more times. I'm just looking for that back bump. Here's the next chain. Turn it, find that horizontal bar. Now, like I said, my hook's too round on the end, so it just doesn't want to go underneath there. So just use your fingernail or whatever and help get your hook underneath there, and then work your stitch. I'll show you one more time. Here's our next chain. just turn it towards you and find that next horizontal bar in the back. That's your back bump. Insert your hook into that back bump and then work your single crochet. So now I'm going to go back and I'm just going to work in the top of the chain in the front. I'm not going to turn it. This is the other way you work it. Just insert your hook into the top of the chain and work your single crochet. So just let me work a couple. I'm going just into the top strand of that chain and I'm working a single crochet. I need to do just enough that you can see the difference of why, if you work in the back bumps, it looks so nice. Okay, so here's my work. Now when you work in the back bumps, you can see your single crochet here look the same as over here. But what it's doing is when you turn your foundation row over, I'm going to take my hook out. When you go into the back bumps, it creates the same look as on the top. See how you have your little heart like shaped for each stitch? It creates that on the bottom. That is when you work in the back bumps. When you just work in the top of the chain, then you get this single strand across. And what happens is this is so much nicer because when you come back and you're putting a border on a project, it is so much easier to see your stitches with this. See how nicely you can just go right underneath those loops like you're just working on the top of your work. And when you work in a foundation row, sometimes you're trying to figure out where that chain is. So even though it's a little more time consuming, and I mean, you know, it's just the look that you want to have. If you don't want to do that, it's perfectly fine to do this. Now the other thing is, I don't do this if I'm doing skipping chains. Like if you're working a shell stitch, let me just rip this out and just show you what I mean. Okay, I'm just going to work a shell stitch. I'm going to work a double crochet. I'm going to skip 2 chain and I'm going to go into that 3rd chain and I'm going to work a shell stitch. So let me get this made real quick. I'm going to chain 2 and then I'm going to work 2 more double crochet. So if you work a shell stitch and then you're skipping 2 stitches and working a shell stitch, or skipping 3 stitches, I do not work in the back bump because it makes no sense. You're going to have all these chains that you didn't work in, so this will be like working into the top of the chain. So when I have a pattern where you're going in each chain across, that's when I do the back bumps. So I hope this helped you a little bit if you're new to crocheting. I hope I didn't go too fast. I hope I didn't confuse you. I just wanted to try to explain kind of some of the basics of when you're learning how to crochet in that foundation chain. So I hope this helped. So thank you for stopping by, and please check out my Stitch of the Week and some of my other videos, and make sure you get your comment in there for all my giveaways. Happy crocheting, everyone!